People think they know this place. When most people hear the word Amazon, they picture endless green, untouched wilderness, rivers twisting like snakes, and maybe a few scattered tribes that have never seen the outside world. They imagine a forest that was always wild, always empty, always the same, but that is not the truth. The truth is that under that green ocean, under those trees and vines and layers of leaves, there are scars, there are patterns, there are shapes that do not belong to random nature, and once you see them, you cannot unsee them. I remember the first time I felt it in my bones that the Amazon was hiding cities. I was in a tiny airplane, one of those little single-engine planes that sound like a giant mosquito. We were flying low over a part of the forest that had been burned and cut. Now, I hate seeing deforestation. It feels like watching someone peel the skin off a living animal. But sometimes, when the forest is stripped away, you get to see what has been hidden for centuries. Down below, the earth opened up in a patchwork. Not random, not chaotic. There were circles, perfect circles, squares, straight lines, enclosures. Imagine a massive green carpet that has been rolled back, and beneath it there is a ghost city outlined in red earth. I pressed my face against the glass and yelled to the pilot over the engine, "Circle back, right there, right there." The pilot banked the plane, and we went around again, the wing tilting, my stomach flipping. And there it was, a huge circular ditch carved into the earth with straight lines radiating out in different directions, like a sun symbol. Nearby, there were more shapes, more earthworks, all in geometric patterns. You do not get these patterns from random erosion. You do not get them from animals. You get them from people. Human hands dug those trenches. Human minds planned those shapes. Human feet walked those lines. And yet, there was no city there now. No stone temple, no obvious ruins. Just this quiet outline burned into the dirt, and forest pushing in from every side like a patient tide. That image stayed with me. I landed, and soon I was sitting with archaeologists and local guides under a tin roof, the rain hammering so loudly we had to shout just to hear each other. They had been mapping those earthworks for years. They showed me pictures, maps, diagrams, but nothing hit me as hard as when I saw the raw aerial images. Giant lines and perfect shapes hidden beneath the canopy, revealed when people cleared the land. "You are looking," one of the archaeologists told me, "at the fingerprints of a civilization that was not supposed to exist." Now here is the thing. For a long time, scientists believed that the Amazon could not support large, complex societies. They thought the soil was too poor, the jungle too harsh, the rivers too unpredictable. They believed there were only small, scattered tribes here, living lightly on the land. The idea of cities, roads, organized agriculture, that was dismissed as fantasy. But that belief was built on a misunderstanding. Let me take you a little deeper. Imagine you are paddling with me down a Blackwater river. The water is so dark it looks like liquid night. The trees lean over us, branches gripping the sky. The air is thick, the kind of thick that makes each breath feel like you are drinking the air instead of breathing it. There are birds calling, frogs clicking, something heavy splashes in the distance. We pull up to a muddy bank, tie the canoe to a root, and start walking into the forest. At first it looks like every other part of the jungle. Vines, buttress roots, leaves bigger than your chest. But as we move in, my foot hits something hard. Not a root, not a rock. I push the leaves aside and there is a chunk of pottery. A shard of a pot, baked clay, the rim decorated with a spiral pattern that someone carved by hand maybe 1,000, maybe 2,000 years ago. I look closer and I start seeing more. A piece of stone that has been shaped into a tool. A small mound that is too regular, too straight to be natural. You can stand in a place like that, surrounded by trees, and not realize that under your feet you are walking across the plaza of a vanished town. The forest is a master of disguise. When something falls here, it does not stay on the surface very long. Plants eat it, roots break through it, fungus, bacteria, insects, rain, all working together. A building falls down, and in a few decades, it is a mound. Give it a little more time, and it becomes a hill covered in trees. Give it a few centuries, and no one would know it was ever anything else, unless you know how to look. I remember one expedition when we were moving through an area that local communities had always told stories about. They spoke of places where their ancestors had lived differently. They described villages with straight roads, open plazas, raised fields. The way they spoke about it, it sounded like legends. But legends usually grow from something real. We were walking along a narrow path when one of the elders raised his hand and stopped us. He stepped off the path and walked into the forest, his feet landing on the ground with a kind of muscle memory that I did not have. We followed him through the vines, up a gentle rise that I had not even noticed. Then he turned to me and said, "You see this hill? This is not a hill. This is a house. Many houses. This is where they lived." I looked around. To my untrained eye, it was just forest. But then I focused. I saw long, straight ridges with rounded tops, all lined up parallel to each other, like the ribs of some enormous buried animal. Those ridges were house platforms. People had built up the earth, made it high and dry, safe from flooding. They had organized these platforms in a pattern. A long house here, another there, a central open space between them. We pushed aside some roots and dug with our hands for a moment. More pottery shards, charcoal, dark, rich soil. Soil that did not match the usual pale, hungry dirt of much of the Amazon. Soil that was black and full of life. That soil has a name. People call it dark earth. Some researchers call it terra preta, which means black earth in the Portuguese language. It is one of the great clues that the forest gives us. This dark earth is not natural. The people who lived here created it. They mixed charcoal, food scraps, bones, broken pottery, and organic waste into the soil. Over generations, they built a supercharged soil that could grow crops far better than the surrounding land. Stand there with your hands in that soil and you can feel the difference. It is soft, crumbly, almost sweet smelling. It is full of nutrients. It can hold water. It can support intensive agriculture. You are not just touching dirt, you are touching ancient technology. Once you understand that, the old story about the Amazon being unable to support big societies starts falling apart. The forest is full of patches of this dark earth. They are like coordinates. Each patch is a memory of a settlement, a village, a town. Connect those points in your mind and you start seeing a picture. Networks of people, food production, trade routes, culture. Let me tell you about another moment that made the hairs on my arms stand up. I was in a camp with a team that was working with airborne mapping. Instead of hiking for months through the forest, they were flying above it, scanning with a technology that sends pulses of light down through the canopy. The readings bounce back and create a three-dimensional map of the ground beneath the trees. So even if you cannot see the ground with your eyes, the machine can see the shapes hidden under the leaves. It was late. We had been out all day. My clothes were soaked through with sweat, and mosquitoes were doing their eternal work on my neck. Someone had set up a laptop on a crude wooden table. They were downloading the day's flight data. On the screen at first, there was just a gray mess. Static. Then the program started to process it. The trees vanished from the picture, like someone had shaved the entire forest bald. And there it was, straight roads, not animal trails, roads, long raised lines of earth, platforms, terraces, a central area that looked like a plaza, rectangular shapes that once had been buildings or house foundations, canals that linked different parts of a settlement. It was like watching an invisible city appear from the void. One of the archaeologists leaned in, pointing at the screen. "Look at the layout," she said. "This whole valley was engineered. The people did not just live in the forest, they shaped it." The scale of it, that was the part that got me. This was not one small town. This was part of a whole system. One hub connected to others, roads radiating outward, linking other communities. It suggested a civilization, or more likely, many civilizations over many centuries, rising and falling, all hidden beneath the forest that I thought I knew. You have to understand how that feels for someone like me, someone who has spent so many years on the ground. I have walked under those trees, I have slept in that mud, I have heard the jaguars and the howler monkeys. I thought I knew this place. And then suddenly I am looking at a map that shows that under my feet there were city blocks, plazas, engineered drainage, giant earthworks. You realize that you are just one set of lungs passing through an ancient body, and it is not just one region. In different parts of the Amazon, people are finding different kinds of earthworks. In some places, the earth was carved into huge geometric ditches. Circles, squares, rectangles, long straight lines. Some of these shapes are hundreds of meters across. In other places, there are networks of raised fields, elevated so that crops would not drown in the rainy season. There are long causeways connecting mounds. There are artificial lakes. Everywhere there are signs that human beings were not just surviving here. They were thriving. They were engineers and artists, shapers of landscapes. So what happened to them? That is the question that creeps into your mind when you're lying in a hammock at night, listening to the rain hammer on the tarp and the distant roar of water in the river. I remember one conversation late at night with an elder from an indigenous community. The fire was low. The night was crowded with the sounds of insects and frogs, like rain made of sound instead of water. He told me stories handed down from his grandparents, stories about great villages that stretched along the riverbanks, stories about longhouses with so many people living in them that their laughter could be heard from far away. He spoke about a time when the river was crowded, not with cargo ships and motorboats, but with fleets of canoes moving up and down, trading, carrying ideas and stories from one bend to another. Then his voice became quiet. He talked about strangers arriving, pale faces, metal weapons, strange animals. Along with them came something invisible, something you could not fight with arrows or spears. Smallpox, measles, influenza, words we say so casually now. But in that time, those invisible enemies moved like fire through dry grass. Communities that had no immunity were struck down. Sometimes entire villages died before anyone had a chance to bury the bodies. Survivors fled, knowledge was lost, traditions were broken, and all around them, the forest waited. When people leave a place, the jungle does not stay empty. Trees rush back in. Vines pour over abandoned structures like slow green floods. Insects, roots, rain all begin to erase the sharp edges. With time, a plaza becomes a clearing, then just another patch of forest. Think about that. In the span of a few generations, entire civilizations can be swallowed. Their roads, their homes, their gardens, all taken back by the land. All that remains are hints. A patch of dark soil, a strange pattern in the trees, a circular ditch revealed when the cattle farmers cut down the can. The old stories, the indigenous oral histories, they act like lanterns. They cast light on fragmentary clues. And now science is starting to catch up, slowly realizing that those stories were not fantasy, they were memories. Once, hiking with a small team, we followed an almost dried out stream. The forest around us was dense. It felt like walking through a trance. Sweat in your eyes, mud grabbing at each step. But little by little, the stream bed stopped looking like a stream bed and started looking more like a ditch, too straight, carefully cut. We climbed up one side and saw that it joined another ditch, and then another, forming a sort of grid. We were standing in what had once been an irrigation system. Imagine the people who designed that. They knew the rains, they knew the floods. They knew the precise way water moved through that landscape. They were not simply accepting what nature gave them. They were negotiating with it, engineering it. Sometimes, when we think of ancient civilizations, we think of massive stone pyramids, giant statues, walls that stand the test of time. The Amazon does not really let you build monuments like that and keep them standing in the open for thousands of years. This is a place that eats rock. It shatters stone with roots. It peels away walls with heat and water. But civilizations are not defined only by stone. They are defined by how people live, how they organize themselves, how they shape the world around them. Here, they shaped it with earth, with water, with soil, with plants. Let me take you back into a personal moment so you can feel it with me. We were camping near a set of ancient mounds. To most eyes, they were just lazy humps in the forest floor. But we knew from tests and digs that these mounds had been built up by people, layer upon layer. They had pottery and charcoal and artifacts inside them. To sleep there was like spending the night on the chest of a sleeping giant. That night, the stars were hidden by clouds. The forest was so dark you could not see your own hand unless the fire lit it. In the distance, thunder growled. You could hear branches cracking as something large moved out there. Maybe a tapir, maybe a jaguar, maybe a tree finally giving up and falling after centuries. I lay there in my hammock looking at the faint glow of the embers and listening to the breath of the jungle. Then something strange hit me. It was a kind of vertigo, but not from height, it was from time. I realized that where I was lying, someone had probably slept before, 1,000 years ago. Maybe a hunter, maybe a child, maybe a mother with a baby. They might have lain in almost the same spot, listening to the same cacophony of insects, smelling the same smell of wet earth and wood smoke. I was the visitor from the future, drifting in and out while the forest did its thing. To the insects and plants, I was nothing, just one more animal passing through. But to me, lying there, I could feel layers of time stacked up beneath my body. It was like listening to a song, and suddenly becoming aware that there were other melodies under it, hidden in the background. That feeling never really leaves you once you have experienced it. You start to see the Amazon differently. You stop thinking of it as just wilderness and start recognizing it as a living palimpsest, a place where human stories have been written, erased, written again, blurred, but never completely lost. People sometimes ask me, so how many people lived here? How big were these civilizations? Are we talking about a few towns, or something as massive as the ancient societies in other parts of the world? The honest answer is that we still do not fully know. But the clues are pointing to something huge. Some researchers suggest that there may have been millions of people living in the Amazon before the arrival of Europeans. Not one single empire, but many different cultures, different ways of living, connected by rivers and trade. Think about the scale of that for a moment. The Amazon basin stretches across almost an entire continent. It is larger than many countries put together, and in that immense space, people were not just scattered in tiny isolated groups. They were building networks, societies, maybe even city-states, all adapted to the forests and the flooding rivers. They were not leaving behind towering stone ruins. Instead, they were leaving living systems, orchards hidden as forest, fields disguised as savanna, groves of useful trees that look wild but are actually the result of careful selection over generations. When you walk in some parts of the jungle and see an abundance of certain fruit trees, or clusters of Brazil nut trees, you might be walking in what is basically an ancient food garden. This idea changes everything. It suggests that the Amazon in many places is not a virgin forest, but a great garden, a garden that has outlived its gardeners. And here we are, in the present with chainsaws and bulldozers, cutting it down often without even knowing what we are destroying. There is a painful irony in how many of these ancient earthworks were discovered. From the air, researchers noticed that when farmers cleared land for cattle, the geometric shapes suddenly became visible. Circles, squares, long straight ditches. I have flown over some of those. You look down and you see cows grazing inside a perfect square earthwork, as if someone had put a herd inside a giant ancient symbol. Part of you is fascinated because the science is exciting. Another part of you feels sick because the same deforestation that reveals these hidden cities also tears apart the living forest that protected them for so long. Chainsaws and fires are acting like archaeologists that kill their patient while they open the body. In the middle of all this, indigenous communities are watching the world finally catch up to what they have been saying for generations. Their stories about powerful ancestors, about sophisticated societies, about sacred places in the forest, those were often dismissed. Now researchers with computers and air surveys and soil tests are coming in, and they are saying, actually, these people were right. The forest has been shaped by human beings for a very long time. Whenever I sit with indigenous elders and listen, I try to remember that I am listening not just to stories, but to data, to memory that is older than many of our institutions. Those stories often mention places of danger, areas where bad things happened, where people disappeared, or where there was violence. In some of those places, archaeologists later find evidence of conflict, fortifications, burned layers. None of this is simple. Civilizations rise and fall. People fight over land and resources. They form alliances, they betray each other, they trade, they change their rituals, they move. The Amazon was not some frozen Eden. It was dynamic and alive, full of human drama. So when you hear the phrase lost civilizations of the Amazon, do not picture a single mythical lost city of gold, glittering with treasure. Instead, picture many societies, each with its own language, its own customs, its own designs carved into the earth. Picture a network of cultures stretching along rivers and floodplains, up hills and into valleys. Now imagine that most of that network has been overgrown. The cities are not made of shining metal. They are made of absence, of gaps in the forest that you only see from above, of soil that is darker and richer than the land around it, of carefully arranged trees that look like random forest if you do not know what you are seeing. You might be wondering, as you lie there listening, why any of this matters now. Why should we care about people who lived, loved, farmed, and died hundreds or thousands of years ago in a jungle most of us will never visit? It matters because it changes how we see one of the most important places on Earth. If you think of the Amazon as an empty space, a void waiting to be filled with cattle ranches and soy plantations, then you treat it like a resource, something to be used up. But if you recognize that this is a landscape shaped by countless generations of human hands, a place where cultures built complex, sustainable systems that lasted for centuries, then you might approach it with more humility. It also matters because, hidden in this story, there might be lessons for our future. Think about those dark earth soils again. Human-made soil that remains fertile for centuries, stable carbon stored in the ground, rich in life. People were doing that here long before the words climate change or carbon dioxide ever existed. They were building systems that captured and stored carbon, that supported diverse crops, that worked in harmony with forest fragments. Think about the way they managed water. Instead of fighting the flood, they worked with it. They built raised fields, canals, embankments that turned seasonal flooding into an advantage instead of a disaster. We live in a time when huge parts of the world are struggling with soil degradation, water scarcity, and the buildup of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. We spend enormous amounts of money trying to fix these things, while under the Amazon canopy, there are clues left by people who figured out some of these problems in their own way, long ago. These lost civilizations are not just about mystery and awe, they are about knowledge. Sometimes, when I am back in the modern world, standing in a concrete city, hearing the roar of traffic and seeing neon lights glowing, I think about those invisible roads and plazas still hidden under the forest. I think about the quiet. There is a weird role reversal happening. Our modern world feels loud and powerful and permanent, like it is going to last forever. But so did every great city in its own time. And yet, here in the Amazon, the forest has already beaten entire civilizations, swallowed them whole. It humbles you. So tonight, as you drift towards sleep, I want you to hold two images in your mind at the same time. On one side, picture the endless canopy of the Amazon rainforest, breathing, pulsing, rivers coiling through it like silver veins, giant trees shouldering their way up toward the sun, flocks of macaws flashing across the sky, the deep call of a howler monkey rolling like thunder. On the other side, overlay that image with ghost patterns, circles and squares carved into the earth, straight raised roads cutting through the forest, fields elevated above the floodwaters, dark soil rich with the ashes and bones and broken pots of countless generations. Whole valleys carefully engineered, now wrapped in jungle. Those two images are not separate, they are the same place, at different times. Right now, somewhere out in that vast green ocean, there is a researcher looking at new maps, realizing that the valley they are studying was not empty at all. Somewhere, a local guide is leading a team across what they know in their heart is an ancestral town, even if it looks like ordinary forest. Somewhere, a farmer is burning down a patch of jungle and, without knowing it, exposing the outline of a forgotten plaza. And maybe, someday, you will see new headlines about another lost city found in the Amazon. People will act surprised again. They will speak about how shocking it is, how unexpected, that there were ancient cities in the heart of the rainforest. But you and I, we will not be surprised. Because you have been there with me. You have walked through that invisible plaza. You have felt the dark earth crumble between your fingers. You have flown in that rickety airplane and looked down at the geometric scars on the land. You have listened to the elders' stories by the fire. You have slept on those mounds with the weight of centuries beneath your back.